Hello there, I'm Greg and I'm making a cobblestone crossroads tabletop gaming board and this little well. This board is intended for use with the game Moonstone, but will work with lots of other games too. Recently I got into the Citadel Contrast and Shade paint range, so I went to my local gaming shop. And by the time I left, not only did I have some lovely Leviathan purple and a rattle can of Wraithbone, I also had a commission. The lovely, enthusiastic owner guy, when I told him what I do, said, right, I need a 3 foot by 3 foot square, probably a crossroads and 3 or 4 buildings. I'm of course doing 4 because I like to impress, and I'm making a well to go in the middle, but that middle is changeable, so one day it may be a statue, it may be a tree, it may be a bandstand, anything that might go in the centre of a little town. In this video, part 1, I'm going to make the terrain board and the well to go in the middle, and then in part 2 I'll make 4 buildings, some of which will have playable interiors or removable roofs. Haven't decided how many yet. I'm very down to the wire with these videos, so I haven't actually done the buildings yet, but I've got it's all planned. It's planned and I've got the bits. Got the shingles, got the bricks, got the beams, got the tools, got the talent. So it's a longish one. We're going to make the board, then cover it in terrain goop, do some cobbles, paint it, then add grass, sand and flocking, then a final painting, weathering and detail run, then we're going to make a miniature well and then see the finished thing. Huge thanks to for the commission. It's lovely to make something that you know somebody really wants, and I've been wanting to get into terrain and miniatures for so long, so having a specific brief of I need this, I think is starting me in a new era. Let's begin that era now. The board. We have engaged the board. So we're starting with a don't do what I did, kids. Just make it out of wood. Right at the end of this, spoilers, there is going to be a wooden frame put underneath this cardboard, but really I wanted to feel smug that I kept the packaging from this lovely big wall mirror we bought with Mother's Christmas money, because it was nice double ply corrugated cardboard and there were these cardboard planks inside, which I'm just sticking to the back of the big sheet of cardboard using liquid nails and hot glue, reinforcing all the back. It's good, but with the weight of it, when you pick it up at the end, it just feels like it could give. And as I say, I'm trying to impress because it's a first time commission. So I will be strengthening this with a bit of wood. This is a cobblestone mould I bought. It's actually intended for use with cake icing, fondant icing. So that defines the width of my road. This is a spare Crichton tummy I just had lying around. So that's going to be my medieval roundabout. These are some of the many things that I've spent the entirety of the fee and then some on, is these little MDF windows. You buy them on eBay. I'm going to use the big ones on their sides because one of the buildings requested was a tavern. So there's going to be a tavern, a barn, a stable and a house. And I realised that to do the terrain I needed to know the footprint of the houses to make sure that they sit on these 4 little hillocks, hummocks, hills, mounds, land masses that I'm going to make out of these yoga mats, which I bought many moons ago from Aldi. I think they were like $4.99. I hope they were cheap because I've used them all. So here I've got my graph paper, is really useful for just drawing up plans. Get a little mini. Nugs is my little space marine that someone at the shop gave me for free because I needed a scale guy and one of my patrons christened him Nugs. So Nugs is always with me and he was useful in deciding the footprints of these buildings. So now I'm just planning out these 4 different hills. Put a fresh blade in and it's incredibly satisfying, just as angled as your knife can be. And then for 2 of these I want them to be 2 floor mats deep, so I'm just using brown paper to make a template for the second layer which goes on top. Throughout this build you're going to hear me criticising myself quite a bit for over-engineering, you know, doing too much of stuff, which I always do because you're always prototyping, it's always the first one. The next one I'm going to know exactly what I'm doing. This one I sort of overdo it. So here I'm sticking down this top layer with liquid nails and then I'm putting in a load of toothpicks to hold it down, so there's a physical connection as well. Probably don't need them because, you know, it's not that heavy duty. It's yoga mats and cardboard. Then as I had the liquid nail gun going, nail gun, and I like using it, I thought I'll use all this liquid nails up to create a sort of smooth transition between these hills and the flat of the cardboard. Didn't need to do this because I'm going to make some terrain goop which more than covers up the edges of these hills. This is about a day's worth of tea bags in our house, which I set in the sun to dry on some kitchen roll weeks ago, because I'm always thinking ahead. I just hate how much viable terrain grit we throw away. Some coffee grounds. This is grit that I bought once from a model shop, sort of train set grit. That was with some fine sand. That's tricolor quinoa. You can take the boy out of Harrogate's, but yeah, this is some old Stanley filler that I bought when we moved house, which is pretty much dried out, so just add some water and really mix it up, and it revivified. And then this is a whole pot of Poundland filler. Add some PVA glue, because that can't hurt. Or can it? No, it can't, it's fine. The cheapest black paints you can find on earth, and then some very cheap brown paint too. Does it look a bit dry? Is there enough of it? Add all the filler. Make more, just make more. Then it wasn't quite a warm enough brown, so I added a load of yellow. Let's enjoy some ASMR. Out in the sunshine, this project has been beset by extreme weathers, as has the planet. This is quite a nice experience. I've got my gloves on and I'm just smearing my terrain goop all over the board in the sunshine, in which it dries very, very quickly. Decided to put goop all along the edges of the board too, so it looks like a square of real life that has been hewn from the very living rock, and is nice and soily. Even smelt nice, because a lot of my wife's old fruit tea's in there. Raspberry fruit tea, so it has this weird Black Forest Gatto smell to it. It doesn't smell gross like it looks like it does. And yeah, and this process of smearing it on with gloves in the sunshine was very pleasant, and it dries very fast, and it dries rock hard. So, as I say, in future, in my next video, if someone else commissions me to make some terrain, I'll be an absolute pro. This is Batman Begins, this is me learning, it's my origin story. In the next one it'll be Dark Knight, and I'll be super cool, and I'll know that this terrain goop is fine. You don't need to smooth in your edges all that much. Save the rest with a bit of cling film to keep the air off, and then the next day, once it's dry, just using a home decorating spatula. This terrain goop is actually nicer to use if you leave it for a few hours. The next day it's gone more and more like clay. I actually used some today to cover over the screws with the wooden frame, and you'll see. It's actually a really nice medium. Polyfiller or spackle, acrylic paint, PVA glue, and some sand. The quinoa was a mistake. Too chunky. It's all Cobbles with you. So this is a brilliant rolling pin my wife got me for Christmas. It has these depth setting discs on the ends, which tell you exactly how thick the roll is, and you just press it down and it regulates. It's a system of regulatory discs, and I love it. Experiment 1. Foam clay. I had some foam clay. Let's try it with foam clay. Takes a long time to dry, but it's very soft, very malleable. So here I'm using the orange discs. Then I've got my cobblestone mould, and I'm putting on the next disc up and pressing it down. Did it work? No, it was rubbish. Experiment 2. Now we're smoothing it out just with our hands and pressing the mould down with our hands. That works fine. But let's keep trying. Experiment 3. Rolled out the foam with a roller, and now I'm pushing down the mould with a roller on the smallest, thinnest setting. Didn't really work. Don't use the roller on the mould, because it pushes the mould so you get this double line. So no. Experiment 4. Roll it out with the thinnest setting, put the mould on, and just press it down a lot. And that works fine. Because the edges of the mould are actually deeper than the details of the imprint, you can push it right down, use it like a cookie cutter, and it won't cut through. Sounds kind of obvious. You can wrap it around a jar if you like. But what other clays have I got? Air drying clay from Jovi. Bon. Use talcum powder like flour to stop it from sticking to the roller and the mould, so it smells great. I smelt like a baby. And when I gave up on the nitrile gloves, which you always do at some point, I had lovely soft hands. So yeah, it's baking. Air drying clay. I've taped down a sheet of greaseproof paper so it doesn't stick to the tabletop either, pressing the mould down and cutting it out. And it holds the details just as well as foam clay, but foam clay is so soft when you've first done it, you have to leave it to cure. So I really liked the air drying clay. Sticking it onto the board a sheet at a time using a PVA and water mix, blending in the edges a bit. The roundabout in the middle is going to be made with foam clay because I used up a whole pack to do these 4 roads. So that's how much you get out of 1 packet of air drying clay. Then an optional extra for perfectionists is dip a wire clay sculpting tool in water and just press in the lines between the tiles. Obviously you could just roll out clay and just hand sculpt, just freehand some cobbles, but in the hope that I'm going to be making more of these, I do want to kind of unify my cobble design, so I'm glad I used a mould, because it means they can be all the same. And then using, so often the tool for the job, an old painty toothbrush to stipple in some more weathering and finer details. Then, because this will need some time to dry before I can stick it on, I just did a whole batch of foam clay cobbles. Foam clay is kind of great and kind of annoying, because it does cure eventually fully hard, but it takes weeks. You can work with it the next day, but it's not fully cured. There's me. Little cobblestone update. It's the next day and this air dry clay does shrink. It's mostly fine. I don't mind these cracks in the cobbles because I can put little tufts of grass coming out of them and make them a feature. You know, it's a new idea, but it does accentuate the joins between my panels. So that's a very clear reason for why you would buy a texture roller, which rolls the texture of cobbles, and you can make it out of one long piece of clay. The odd natural looking crack in the path I don't mind at all, but the ones that show off my technique, I might fill those. But have I just gone online and bought a texture roller? Yes. And that texture roller has now arrived and looks very promising. So here I did realise I don't need filler, because even 24 hours later it's got a crusty skin on it, but it's still soft underneath, so I'm just pressing the gaps closed. Then the next day, here are my foam clay sheets that have cured a bit overnight, so they're bendy and just crispy enough. So I'm just going around the edges, making sure it's a wavy line, not that straight rectangle which kind of gives away the tiling. And then using my snips just to pick out all the tiny little triangles between cobbles so that I can interlock them, which is one thing this is really good for, is they're very stretchy and flexible, so you can lace them together in a way that sufficiently hides the fact that they are tiled rectangles. There, you can just press it into submission. Liquid nails, no more nails, no more nails. Construction adhesive, as this week's YouTube channel recommendation would call it. But now it's time to spray paint. Do you know what? I feel like painting them with a paintbrush. So this is Mod Podge, then some black acrylic paint, and a little bit of Vallejo, this very runny primer, which is, I know, is intended for airbrushes, but I did see a guy online saying you can just paint it on with a brush, so I bought some. But it's pretty runny. So here I'm just using my big old rough pastry brush and really wanging it in there, just really stipple it into all the cracks. This is crazy. This is soil that's going to be covered with grass. The terrain goop was already brown. You don't need 50 shades of brown. So I'm just picking out some cobbles with a yellow ochre, grey and green mix, and then a brighter grey, again using this wall paint because it's just a nice grey-green. Let's make some cheap flocking. So this is Asda Just Essentials mixed herbs. This is some tea that my wife dried during the foraging frenzy of the first lockdown. And this is some almost flavourless orange tea we bought on holiday in France. It has its uses, just not as a beverage. Oh, and the tabs are a reasonably entertaining cat toy. I mean, it's not hours of fun, but he gave it a buff. Stick him in the NutriBullet, or the Argos Cookworks knockoff NutriBullet. And here are our ingredients. I do set up these shots, you know. I do actually take the time to go, okay, we've got some sand, some gravel, some nutmeg, some powdered ginger we never use, the flocking powder I just made, and some curry powder as well. Cover a layer of PVA glue, spread it out exactly where you want grass to be. Then you can either sprinkle it on with your hand, or if you want to feel like a bit more of a pro and get a slightly more even bit of coverage, use a sieve. And then, because I want this to be patchy and slightly dead and kind of rugged sort of scrub land, anywhere I can still see bits of white glue, I'm just covering with fine aquarium sand. But it's pretty brown, it's not very bright green, which we will fix in a minute. Brushing off the loose detritus, and that already looks kind of great. Areas of PVA glue I want to put some gravel on, so this is little grit. I need some finer grit. These were kind of nearly boulders in scale. And then to cover up the uncovered glue, I'm just sprinkling sand on with my rocks. First take up the isopropyl crystal. This is isopropyl alcohol which you wet the surface with because it helps the glue break its surface tension and disperse much better, and I've seen a test and this does work. Then simply wield the shard of fixation and just cover it in glue. In fact, not glue, this is Mod Podge and water. I bought a 900 and something milliliter tub of Mod Podge. So if I'm looking a bit yellow, it's because I had to sell a kidney. Yeah, so here you can see the effect of the isopropyl alcohol. It's worth it because it just breaks the meniscus and the glue goes into all the sand and you get a very hard crust. This, I think, is the first bit I've ever just fully forgotten to film. The next day, once all my homemade flocking was dry, I just put on more PVA glue, but more patchily, and put on the static grass, again with a sieve, so it's greener and a bit more lush. These cobbles to me looked a bit wet and dark and shiny, so I'm just dusting them up and warming them up so they feel old and matched in with the terrain around them. Another thing I would do next time is stick down the cobbles first, then put on the terrain goop so you can cover over the edge of your cobbles and make them look embedded in the ground much more easily. But these are a joy to dry brush. This is yellow ochre and grey mixed just to make them warm. Then this is moss paste. This is some more of my leftover flocking powder I made mixed with PVA glue, and I'm just using it as a gap filler anywhere there is a gap which I consider to be egregious. These are little grass tufts you can buy online. Just stick them in with super glue and they look kind of awesome. I thought let's try lots of different terrain things. This is a sort of test board. So a bit of UV resin to make a puddle in this kind of wet muddy corner, and then this very cheap pound shop glitter paint in a kind of tealy peacocky colour and bronze, just so that puddle has some particles and bits of interest in. The client, the Commissioner Gordon, asked for colour. It's quite a labyrinth inspired Henson-esque goblins and people riding around on pugs. It's a whimsical world, so he asked for colourful things, so there will be colourful flowers and colourful shingles on the roofs, and it's nice to have that bit of license. And then finally, there's just very quick shots because I'm slightly ashamed, but once it was all finished, yeah, it needs to be on a wooden frame. Bought some wood, made a square out of it, stuck it on with liquid nails, put screws in with washers so the screw doesn't go all the way through the cardboard because you can't screw into cardboard, and then I'm covering it over again with some remaining terrain goop, and finally painting the edge black. And I'm very proud of that. Oh, intermission. Get some snacks, go to the lobby. Well, well, well. This is a centerpiece for my crossroads. So this is a segmented plastic disc that Grandad used to get when he bought his blank CDs and DVDs that I'm filling with leftover terrain goop. This is a nice wooden hexagonal tray I got from a charity shop, which is a bit too nice to use for this, so I'm just making a template out of it because I like the size and shape. I would cut this out of one big piece of cork, but I haven't got a big piece of cork, so I'm dividing it into triangles because I had 5 of those round cork coasters. That's my terrain goop. Sprinkled some talcum powder on it for no reason. It looks mouldy, but it's not. Then I'm just holding all these triangles together with a bit of wood laminate vinyl on the bottom because it's sticky but it's nice and thin. Liquid nails, of course. Let it squeeze out, and it's also a gap filling thing around the edge. There's me. Exciting breakthrough time. This is a silicone fondant icing mould to do brickwork, which I bought because it was cheaper than a texture roller. I just thought of filling it with hot glue. I've coloured it in with a black marker pen so you can see it. Just got the glue very hot so it was very runny and would therefore pick up better detail. You can use plaster of Paris, which is very cheap, very highly detailed, but takes hours to set. This takes 2 minutes. You can cut it with scissors, you can fold it round corners, and it's brickwork. So yes, if you have access to cheap glue sticks and you're impatient, if you're not impatient, use plaster of Paris, because that's as runny as milk, so it's really highly detailed and it sets quite fast. But it's also brittle, and because this is a board that's going to get moved around, I want it to be quite shock resistant and... yeah, hot glue. Hot glue! It'll do! I love my glittery bricks. Just sat and watched a drag race and went through a whole box of these cheap glittery hot glue sticks. So using a tin foil cardboard tube as my inner core, just wrapping it around, and that is the orange cap ring off the front of a toy pirate gun as the lintel, the mantelpiece. What are the parts of a well called? I don't know. Heat it up on the back, don't heat the front or you'll melt the details of the bricks. You fool. Curve it around the tube. Cutting the brickwork out so it fits together is fiddly but satisfying, and then I'm onto green glitter glue to hold it all together, so it's the most festive looking miniature well I've seen all afternoon. Then to put some texture into the pirate ring, the lintel, the mantelpiece, the grommet, I'm just putting on some UV resin and stippling it a bit with a sponge, but that's maybe not the best way, so I also put on some baking soda and super glue. Wow, this is edited fast. Then I'm using a hot pyrography tool, because what uses a cold pyrography tool, to melt in some brick lines, and once I put it... That's too fast. Then I stood it next to Nugs and decided it was one brick too tall, so I'm cutting off one of the bricks so the base is now only one brick high. Made a roof out of 2 bits of dowel and just some balsa wood, and then I'm making a, again, over-engineered, this is too heavyweight, this MDF, but just cut 2 bits of MDF, beveled the edges so they sit together like that. Then I put hot glue down the spine, held it together with tape. This is a pin vise, don't know why it's a vise, it's just a tiny hand drill, and I'm using a paperclip to make the bucket crank. Obviously we all know that's what that part is called. I want the roof to have a little bit of a bow, a bit of a slight Tim Burtonism to it, because it's a whimsical world. So I'm just cutting these out of thin grey chipboard and taping it all together. Could have just used the chipboard. As I say, I think that thick MDF in there is overkill. And then capping off the ends and the underside with some textured coffee stir sticks and some lolly sticks or popsicle sticks as well. Shingles! I've got shingles! These are cut out with some little pinking shears, you know, craft scissors that cut out a scalloped edge. And then again, just a nice thing to sit and do while you're watching TV, or indeed get your wife to help you do it as well. And put a little slit between each one, but they're still joined together in rows, so it can look like you stuck them on individually, particularly if you fold out each alternate one, so they just have a bit of texture up and down. But when I come to do the houses, I'm going to use black card, because it's easier to paint, and this thick card was a bit shiny, so it doesn't take paint that well. Speaking of black card, that's what that piece is. Strip of folded black card, then I use my gomja bar to put some little nail holes in it. This is the bucket arm. It's a natural piece of actual twig that was hollow, so worked very nicely. Then just use super glue to hold some jewellery chain in place. Super glue activator for when 20 seconds is just too long. So I'm holding in one end of this bucket stanchion with a nice brass furniture nail and putting the bucket crank in the other end, and then finally run some super glue down the chain to make the chain stay rigid. Now, because the well has freestanding feet, I want to give it its own stone base, so I'm just using some sticky backed cork and grey card to make a stone disc. Painting the well and the roof of the well with, again, a mixture of Mod Podge, black acrylic paint and a little bit of that Vallejo primer, because if you're priming it can't hurt to put in some primer. But yeah, this is a bit where it's a bit fiddly, particularly when you can't spray paint, because there's lots of nooks and crannies. So I will be using black card for the shingles on my 4 buildings. This well was a test piece and a very good one. Natural oak, some wood stain I already had in the house. Thought I'd try it, suspected I wanted the wood to be a bit darker, which I did, so I'm going to restain it the next day. This, again, this cheapo pound shop glitter glue, I love it. It's got no coverage at all. I said glitter glue, it's meant to be paint. It may as well be glitter glue because it's sort of clear medium with glitter in it, but it just puts a lovely shimmy and shine. And I ended up loving it for this. I used it to treat my shingles, and it worked. Another omission, sorry, didn't film myself painting the well, but it's just a heavy dry brush of salmony orange brick red basically, and then a lighter dry brush of yellow ochre and grey, so give like a warm highlight to the whole thing. Then I decided that this base and whatever other things I make to put on it should be magnetized, because magnets are fun. So sticking it in, using a pencil, tried to use my gomja bar, but you can't hold a magnet in place with a metal implement. So putting that in with super glue and baking soda and covering it in 2-part epoxy. Filled the well with a little circle of foam yoga mat and an extra disc of cardboard in the bottom to make it the right height. And then I'm putting on UV resin, into which I'm stirring a bit more of my beloved peacock coloured glitter paint and some green. I worried the green was too opaque at first, but it sort of curdled like that, and I love how it looks. Then I'm using my little UV torch, and because my time is valuable, I set up a system to hold the torch for me. And did other more important things. Dry brushing the base with, again, yellow ochre and grey, a very warm grey. I found myself wanting to warm this up a lot, so yellow ochre is the paint I've run out of. And I'm sticking the well to its own little mini base with liquid nails in the centre, super glue around the outside, and that is very satisfying. The magnet is just strong enough that you can pick up the base. Then to make it look old, just put super glue all around the cracks and crevices and feet and sprinkle in some more flocking grass powder. And then if you do buy some of these tufts, if you've got some of these grass tufts, cut them in half and then you've got twice as many, secure them with super glue, and the job is done. Let's take a look at the finished thing. Zzz. Super duper. I like the sound of Moonstone. You drop a load of D4 dice and where they land, that's the Moonstones, which your characters then compete to kind of snaffle because they're valuable. I'm not much of a gamer because I haven't got much of a rule brain, but I've loved making this stuff and I'm excited about little houses. I've been making a lot of one-to-one props, but there's something about miniature, isn't there? There's that space, that area on your desktop that just has a little tiny world in it. Where is it? So every time I look at this thing, I just find it slightly magical. Which I guess is the joy of miniatures, because you're transporting yourself to a different scale world. I like the tactile experience of holding a prop, but the fact that that is a paperclip, that has some magic to it, doesn't it? Today's YouTube channel recommendation is someone I can't believe I haven't already recommended, but Eric's Hobby Workshop. Have I recommended him already? He's one of the first miniature terrain people I started watching in that early hobby lockdown, you know, back in the day. And he's still one of the brightest and best. He does Warhammer, Necromunda, wartime, medieval, historical stuff. Just lots of really good, inspiring builds and very well made videos. And I will be doing some industrial terrain soon. That will owe him a great deal. Hopefully he's not a litigious person. No, he seems like a very nice guy, and you've heard of him already. If you know about these things, you've heard of him, but highly recommended. If you yourself have been affected by any of the issues in this program and are a gamer, or indeed run a gaming shop, and you know, you might want a big bolt gun to hang on your wall. You might want some Necromunda-y kind of 40k terrain type stuff. You might want some Mordheim stuff. You might want me to do something with that toy pirate ship I got off Facebook Marketplace. I'm here. You know, dioramas, display things, gaming boards, hit me up. You can be the commissioner. And I'll be Batman. I think I referenced Batman earlier, and I said Commissioner Gordon. Subtext. Metaphor. Powerful. So I have been excited and remain excited to make a stable, a tavern, a cottage and a barn. That's the next video. Thank you very much to my patrons. Thanks to you for watching. Lots of love from me, and I will see you fairly soon. And you've got twice as many. Use super glue to... The camera just wobbled because the cat is rubbing on the tripod. Okay, he's turned over now. Where was I?